So welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us on this Friday, and thanks Becca for coming along again. Always a pleasure.
You're welcome.
So just a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to be running the chat and the Q&A. So if you've got any sort of general comments that you want to pass to ourselves and to each other, feel free to use the chat. And then the Q&A, if you've got any questions for us, it's really helpful if you put the questions in the Q&A rather than in the chat, because that way we can particularly spot those. So we'll be constantly scanning. If you see me looking to the screen on the side, that's not because I'm doing my messaging or anything. It's just because I'm looking at the Q&A, which I've got on a separate screen. So look, let's kick things off. We're here to talk about the difficult subject of redundancies. Obviously, that's a topic that's facing an awful lot of businesses as we go out of, move between lockdowns. So what we wanted to do was to bring along Becca, who we've worked with a lot at Breathe, and she's one of our most trusted partners. So why don't I hand over to you, introduce yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. Hello, everybody. I'm Becca Warmington. I run and own HRCentral Limited. We're based in South Oxfordshire, but we do cover companies nationally. But we do like to focus on the Thames Valley just so that we can go and talk to our clients face to face. But we provide outsourced HR for all of our clients, from recruitment all the way through to termination of employment and everything in between. And we use Breathe a lot for all of our clients. So we love working with them. They're a great resource.
Brilliant, excellent. Okay, good. So, excuse me. Another last little bit of housekeeping before we really kick things off. We are recording the session so we can send it out to everybody. So we'll send that out in an email. If not later on today, then more likely probably on Monday morning. But you will get that. Great. So look, Becca, let's sort of kick things off with the topic on redundancy. Now, where do you recommend businesses start with the process? It's often, I've been through that situation before, and you, as a business owner, you kind of know in your heart that you've got to do something, but it, your heart equally says you don't want to. How do you get started with that?
I ask all of our clients to plan, and it's like any difficult conversation you have to have with an employee. You need to plan. You need to have a plan of action so that you have a script to follow, that you know the reasons why you're having that conversation. And it's no different with redundancies than any other difficult situation you have to have. So I always ask our clients to fill out a business plan. And that sounds counterintuitive, because a business plan in most people's views is about growth, rather than sort of making redundancies and retracting a company. But I really think that planning for the future will really help you to focus on what it is that you're trying to achieve. So if you get you should have all the management information you require to be able to justify the decision, and really just go through a process. And we've got forms that we give to our clients so that they can really structure their thought process and understand why they're doing what they need to do. Because as you say, Jonathan, a lot of my clients start off with a gut feeling as this isn't working, or I've noticed that we've had a drop in sales. I need to look at maybe making some redundancies, or just making some changes generally within the business. And so many of my clients think they just need to go and cut people out of the business, and that's not always the case. If you have a real plan of action, you can start thinking about, right, what does the future look like? What am I going to have to do? What am I going to have to do with the changes I'm going to have to make within my business to ensure that we can come out of whatever situation you're facing, be it lockdown, a drop in sales, a difference in legislation. Obviously, we've got Brexit coming up at the end of this year as well. So there's lots of challenges for a business owner at the moment, and I think it's about knowing your management information and planning for what you're going to say and what you're going to do, and looking at the timeline as well, because it might be that you have to have numerous redundancies or numerous conversations with people about changing hours, about them maybe working part-time, or maybe salary reductions. All of those things go into this pot really, and I think it's about being prepared and understanding your management information before you go ahead.
And I guess I just love that piece of advice. There must be occasions where you actually ask somebody to sit down and do the business plan, and they come out of it thinking, do you know what, redundancies aren't right. Or maybe the timing just isn't there, or maybe there's something else that can be done. You know, I'm hearing a lot of organizations that are mutually agreeing with employees that a pay cut is the right way to try and move things forward, or furloughing or whatever. So, you know, I love that. And also, is it the case with a plan that if you start off in a structured way, then you start to have the answers ready for when you have those conversations with the employees?
I think as a business owner, you can have an idea of what you think the answers are, because obviously you own the business and you're integral to the business, and you know the business probably better than anybody else. However, the whole point of consulting with an employee is to really hear their views. And there's a brilliant example, and it wasn't in the redundancy scenario, but I understand there's an issue with a really well-known company that make china, and they had processes in place, and they didn't consult with their employees at all. The management team told them how it was going to be, and they would hang these cups up on little handles, and they had loads of breakages. And so when they did ask the employees what the issues were and what they really thought they could do with put them on, don't hang them on the handles, just put it straight, and then you won't have the tension on the handles and it won't break. And that's a really good example of how you might think you know the business, you might think you know exactly, but if you're not talking to people at the grassroots, then you don't really understand all of the nuances. You know, most of us have to trust our team, and they do trust our team. They're here for a reason. They're trusted people within our environment. We don't micromanage them. We let them get on with it. They know the job best. And so it's best to talk. So although you have your business plan and you think you know what you're going to do, that's when the consultation process has to start. And it's really imperative that you get that right, and that you have all these conversations under the wrapper of consultation as part of the redundancy process. But it might be that those conversations throw up something that you hadn't considered as a business owner. It might be that somebody's happy to go part-time. They're happy to take a sabbatical, for example. I've had that in the last few months. They're happy to take a pay cut for a period of time. I think it's about having that two-way conversation, because the minute you put you open yourself up as a business owner to have those proper conversations, then the communication will flow. And there's nothing worse than you as a business owner thinking there's something wrong, and you will exude that. You know, when you're in the business environment, your anxiety will come across, and if your employees don't understand why you're feeling anxious, they'll start second guessing. And you don't want to lose your best people to another company because they think, actually, I think there's something happening. I'm going to jump ship before I'm thrown out. You know, we really want to open that communication channel and ensure that everybody has their say about what's going to happen.
And I guess it's always true. Whenever I've thought there's been a secret in the business or something that I'm only party to, everybody knows it. And certainly in this situation, everybody knows when a business is struggling. So actually just coming out and being authentic and just saying that this is something that, you know, maybe don't say we're thinking of redundancies, but say business is suffering.
There's a problem. Yeah, there's a problem. I think transparency from a business owner is key. And you know, you've got a trusted team. Why wouldn't you speak to them? You know, why wouldn't you communicate with them? And actually, it does. Everybody was saying at the beginning of shutdown, we're all in this together. There's nothing more truer than a business and its employees. You have to be in it together to get to the other side.
And I think just sort of stepping across to a slightly different scenario as well, for a business that is actually doing okay. through this, it's actually important to tell everybody we're doing okay.
Yes.
Just to keep that reassurance going. Look, so we've got the idea of the business plan, counterintuitive, but all the good reasons for having it. I also like the idea with the business plan that it gives you the chance to build a picture of what the other side is going to look like. So both for yourself as the business owner and also the employees that will be left behind, it's saying, right, this is tough now, but this is going to see us through. It's showing the light at the end of the tunnel, I guess, isn't it?
Yes, it's a blueprint to work towards, and I think it is really important to have a plan of action, because I've had a number of clients who we've got to cut the costs. We just got to cut the costs. Therefore, we have to throw people under the bus, and we just need to move it forward quickly, as soon as we can. And we're going to use furlough for some of these things, which obviously you can't do now. You can't use furlough for notice payments as of 1st of December, as you could before. So there was this panic of we can't afford to pay notice, we can't afford to pay all these things. So let's get it done quickly. And actually, it's about stopping and thinking about what you're doing, because these are people, they're real people. They're not just a commodity. They've got lives of their own, and actually, it's around doing the right thing by people. And I do think that it's not always the answer. It's not always the answer. There might be different ways of doing it. There might be a way of maybe doing something different within the business. So, for example, one of my clients in events business, they've started selling wine instead of doing events, and they've had to make some redundancies, but they've managed to retain a lot more people than they would if they hadn't had that business idea.
Yeah.
Otherwise, everybody would have had to go. We'd have had to close the doors. So it's about being imaginative, and that idea came from one of their employees.
Yeah. Well, I also know that just in the village where I live, we're quite lucky. We've got 2 pubs in the village or close to the village, and one of them is doing a storming trade of takeaway, and the other one's just decided to close the doors. And that must be down to can the pub pull everybody together and around another idea and take them off in that direction. Look, you touched on furloughing there for a moment, and this isn't really about furloughing, but I think it's important. When we were planning for this, talking yesterday, you were saying about getting the reasoning right for furloughing. Just sort of touch on that a little bit. Is furlough a crutch that businesses should lean on?
I think it's been a brilliant scheme for companies that are coming out. So they've had to almost shelve their employees for a while because they can't open and do the business, but they are going to open again and be able to pick up exactly where they left off. The furlough scheme is a job retention scheme. It's not to be used for keeping companies that were limping along anyway and that are just avoiding having these difficult conversations with their employees as part of perhaps a redundancy process. It's certainly not there to supplement holiday pay, or we had one inquiry very early on in furlough where they said they wanted us to do some furlough letters, which of course we were really happy to do, and you have to have those. You record them on your Breathe system, but at the end of the day, we said no to that, because the reason that employer wanted to do those furlough letters and use the furlough scheme was she wanted to take 6 weeks out of the business because she was tired and wanted a rest. And we just said no, that's really absolutely not what you should be using the furlough scheme for. We've had inquiries recently around the Christmas break. People are going to be off on holiday for 2-3 weeks. We're just going to furlough them for that time, and we'll use 80% of the government money to pay their holiday. That is absolutely not what it is for. It is for keeping people going in some industries, such as hairdressing, the beauty industry have used it a lot. And hospitality, when you cannot open, but that when you do open, your business will hopefully carry on in the same strain, albeit with some restrictions, obviously with social distancing. It's a job retention scheme, and I think people need to be really mindful of that and very careful. And as of the 1st of December, gov.uk will have a list of all of the companies using the furlough scheme. So they're watching, and there will be some inquiries. They're on a huge recruitment drive at the moment, and they will be taking people on to monitor this. And I think SME think they're under the wire, and they're absolutely not. Everybody's going to be investigated if they're abusing the scheme. So be very careful, people. Good.
Look, okay. So that's that's sort of the touching on the furlough piece. I should probably add that, you know, we're really open to questions, so pop them in the Q&A. What we're going to have to avoid is getting into too much detail or specifics on individual cases, because clearly it's not right. That should be an open forum. But we'll give you Becca's contact details at the end, and you know, feel free. But you know, chip in there and ask questions along the way if you can. There's one more piece on the planning side that I just wanted to cover, and that's to do with actually thinking about the skill sets that you need as a business, rather than, so think about it from the skill set rather than the people. So,
Yes.
you know, is that important?
Yes, very important. I think if you're going to take your business forward and justify your decisions, so for example, if you have a pool of maybe 10 people, and I'm using that as an example, you might not have a pool that big of people who are doing the same role. You need to think about the skill set that you need to retain within the business. And if you're taking that group of 10 down to 4 people, for example, you need to be really clear and sure about how you're marking those people so that you keep your best 4 people. And that could be any manner of issue that you need to retain, but you need to have a good thought process about it, because otherwise you're just going to end up throwing the people out of the business that are actually really going to be key. And it's not about any other reason than the skill set that they're going to bring with the business to take it forward. Yeah. And I think that's really important. But going back to sort of some of the planning side of things, it's really important. And I think people don't realise that if you have a conversation with somebody around a redundancy type issue, you should do it under the wrapper of the consultation process. So you should open a conversation with, you know, your role is at risk of redundancy, but we haven't made any decisions yet, and we need to carry on talking to you. And those conversations can go over a period of time. You know, it doesn't need to be done in 2 or 3 conversations. It can be over a period of time. If you think that you actually probably need to make redundancies in February next year, but you're worried about losing your people, there's no reason why you couldn't just say to them, look, you know, there's a risk, there's a small risk here, but I want to talk to you about how we can avoid that risk. By opening up that channel of communication, you actually stop them from Googling over Christmas to find a new role because they suspect that in January or February there's going to be a different scenario. We've got all sorts of challenges coming up. We've got Brexit. You know, the furlough scheme's only running till the end of March or so. We think it might be extended again. I think it's unlikely with all the vaccines that are coming through that they will extend it again, but who knows? You know, who knows what the government will do? They tend to make decisions very last minute at the moment. But I think it's about being honest and transparent and recording those conversations and making sure that you have proper records that you can refer back to so that you can show that you have consulted fully with an employee.
Yep. So we've got a question come in. Are there legal requirements to have a consultation process, or can you make redundancies without a consultative process?
No, if you don't consult with your employees fully, and you have to have proof of that, which is why I say document absolutely everything, the dates, the times, the content. I mean, Zoom is our friend in this environment. You can have those remote conversations and record them. Everybody has a transcript of the conversation, or you have a recording of the conversation. Everybody knows what's been said, and that protects you as an employer, and actually it gives the employee a chance to go back over what's been said. So we can use Zoom in a really positive way, but there is a legal requirement to consult with employees. You absolutely have to. And if you don't consult fully, it will deemed to be as unfair.
So I always think it's an interesting term, consulting, in that it suggests that there is an alternative. No, and I guess in some cases there are, but if you've gone through your business plan and redundancies just have to happen and you're convinced of that, you're not actually saying to an employee, is it okay if I make you redundant? No,
that's not the nuance really. I think the emphasis is there's a risk of redundancies. And one of my clients recently, we're going to take 3 roles down to 1 because they only had the money to pay for 1 full-time resource. So those 3 employees decided they were going to split the role 3 ways and go take a third of the salary.
Right.
Yeah, and that's absolutely fine. And that's great because that keeps the company going. Yeah, they can all work together. And if it works, I mean, you don't have to accept their recommendations. You don't have to accept their suggestions. But I think business owners would have been nervous, or this business owner particularly would have been nervous to go to these 3 people and say, I'm going to cut your salary by 2/3, and by the way, we're just going to limp through till February and see how it goes.
Yeah.
But they did that. They suggested it with good faith. It started to work. Everybody's been told what's going on. Everything's been documented. We're going to review it again in February. Hopefully, if business picks up, everybody can go to full pay again. And
Yeah.
so you've done that under the wrapper of consultation as part of a redundancy process, potential redundancy process. No decisions were made about that beforehand. We consulted fully with the individuals. They came up with some imaginative solutions. They've kept their jobs, and hopefully when things pick up, they will go back to full-time working, and it was a blip.
Yeah. Okay, so there's another interesting question, sort of getting a little bit into specifics, but I think it's a really interesting one, is can you make a pregnant employee redundant, or could it be seen as unfair dismissal?
Pregnant employee has enhanced rights during the redundancy process, so I would take advice on specific situations.
So it's not a no, but it's not an easy yes.
No, it's not an easy yes, and I think if you're making everybody redundant, then they're not going to retain their job in that scenario. But if you're making redundancies, you have got to think about that really carefully, because even when they come back, they've got enhanced rights. So I would be very careful about that.
Yeah. Is it sometimes, I think this kind of decision about redundancies and who and how, and sometimes it's really a case of, as a business owner, where do you balance the risk? So do you run away from the need to make somebody redundant because it's going to be difficult, or it's going to be potentially litigious or whatever? Or do you just have to say that's a level of risk that I've got to take?
I think that I was talking to an employment lawyer about this the other day, because we've made some redundancies and they weren't happy about being made redundant. There was an appeal process, and they were threatening.
This was at a client, was it?
Yeah, with a client. So I spoke to one of our employment lawyer contacts just in passing. We were talking about something else. The tribunals tend to not go into too much detail about why you need to make that redundancy. They're not going to ask you to justify your decision. What they're going to want to see is that you've behaved fairly, that you've behaved honourably and decently, and that you've followed a very well-documented process that's legally compliant.
Yeah.
So I think as long as you've got your business plan and you and your head have decided that you need to reduce costs, and you follow the process and you document everything properly, and you give everybody the right, and you listen to them, and you do consult with them fully, and you give them the right to be accompanied at the right stages, and you give them the right of appeal, and you listen and take away you don't have to accept somebody's suggestions, but you do have to give it due consideration. And out of courtesy, you would go back to an employee and say, that doesn't work, and these are the reasons why.
Yeah. Yeah.
So at the end of that process, you've both really thought about the options and come to a conclusion. And actually, when that time has come. It might be 3 or 4 discussions, might be 2 discussions, but when that consultation process has come to an end, and that's when you say, right, okay, there's nothing more to discuss here. We're going to have to confirm this, or we've discussed it. That's great. You came up with a solution that I hadn't thought of. We're going to adopt that for a little period of time and see if that works. If it doesn't, then we're going to have to revert back to, and you remain at risk, but let's just keep that going for a little while and just see what happens. And I think it's all about transparency and documenting things properly and following a proper process that has been documented before you start. So you understand the letters that you need to send, you understand the wording, and it's really important to go through the proper process and have an appeal process at the end, and make sure that you hear that appeal and that it's done appropriately, because most claims on a redundancy process, I think, are probably on the lack of process, and it's automatically unfair.
Right. And that comes back to your business plan again, because I guess that the output of the outcome of any business plan is actually, how am I going to operate? How am I going to do this process? I'm interested in your view. There was one piece of advice that I got, I don't know, probably 15 years ago. One of my first businesses, we had to make some fairly serious redundancies. And I was given advice by a business coach at the time about cut once, cut deep. So don't keep it going. Now, you've just shaken your head on that one.
Yeah, I think you can throw the baby out with the bathwater in some scenarios. And I think business owners panic and see that they need to cut costs and maybe go too far sometimes. And I think that it all comes back to having the proper management information and knowing your business and understanding exactly what it is that you want to do. And I think, again, it goes back to the communication. If you sit everybody down and say, look, this is the situation, we may have to make redundancies. I think as long as you don't lie to people, as long as you don't have a one redundancy process and then say, well, that's it now, folks, we're going to be okay going forward. And then 3 weeks later go, actually, sorry, got that wrong. We're going to have to cut some more jobs. I think as long as you're transparent and open and people know where they stand. And as a business owner, you can't always retain your people. You know, if you're honest and transparent to a point and they still decide actually that's too much risk for them, that they need to have continuity, they may well leave. You have to accept that that's going to be the case. You can't always keep people on side. But I think if you're open and transparent, it is about having that conversation with everybody so that they understand what's going on and you understand what's going on so that you can plan for the future of the business. I think cutting once and cutting deep, it's maybe throwing the baby out with the bathwater when you don't need to.
So I guess it's more a case of plan what you need to cut and cut within that plan and recognize that the plan is based on the best information that you know at the time.
Yeah, and things change. You know, things change. You know, some of my hospitality clients they could keep going for a certain period of time within furlough, but actually as it's gone on and the furlough reduced, they had to pay more and more NI and they had to pay the nest payments for their people with no income. You know, that becomes a drain on resources, and then you realise actually you need to cut some more roles. So I think it's just about not making false promises to people. Just being very careful what you say and not saying that's it, we're done now, it's going to be okay and everything, because it's an ever-changing field. We don't know what the future's going to bring right now.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. So this is clearly a topic of interest. We've got a couple more questions in. What point does the employee have the right to be accompanied? So would that be during a consultation meeting or is it later in the process?
It tends to be, or traditionally it's later in the process, so you don't need to be accompanied for most of the consultations. But saying that, I'll caveat that with, so basically if the normal consultation, if there's such a thing as a normal consultation process, they don't need to be accompanied until you get to the final stage, because then you would write to them saying this is likely to be the last consultation meeting. A result of this meeting may well be that we have to terminate your employment, and then you would give them the right to be accompanied. But caveating that, I've got a situation at the moment with somebody who's incredibly anxious and has been signed off sick with stress-related anxiety to do with work. So it's only kind and right to give them the opportunity to be accompanied to some of those discussions, if they want to be accompanied, to give them the support, because it's a stressful situation. You know, it's not nice. Not everybody wants to go through that on their own. I think if you have somebody very young within your business, you might well say to them, you know, you don't have an automatic right, but do you want to be accompanied by another colleague? I would be very careful about who you allow to accompany, because what you don't want is, you know, a whole great big legal team turning up to a consultation process, because, you know, consultation is just that. It is talking to your employees about how to avoid a situation. And it can escalate sometimes with everybody getting involved and getting very antsy about something that actually is just a conversation, and it might well never happen. You know, you might get a massive piece of work in and say, right, do you know what, actually, sorry, we're back on again, let's go.
Around. Yeah. Consultation if the employee's under 2 years service?
Yes, definitely. Because it's still, you're still making them redundant. You know, you're still going through that process, and consultation is all about trying to avoid the situation.
Is that for under 2 years service, is that a legal requirement or is it just a sensible thing to do?
I think it's a sensible thing to do, because if you've got somebody who's got, so for example, and this is a real life example of something that I'm dealing on at the moment with a client, they phoned me up and said, got somebody who's got under 2 years service, I can't sustain this anymore, I'm gonna let them go. Is that okay with you? And I'm like, well, on paper, in theory, they've got under 2 years service. Well, okay, if you don't want to go through a redundancy process, you don't absolutely have to, but I would go through that proper process. And they asked me why, and I said, well, have they got disability? Well, I don't know. And we started talking a bit further, and actually that person has got a disability. And so if you throw them out without going through a proper process, yeah, you're going to end up with a claim. So they might not have 2 years service, but if you don't look at the whole picture and do it properly, and why wouldn't you go through a process? All you're doing is talking to somebody about it under a wrapper that actually protects you as a business owner. And I think it's about being careful and understanding exactly what you're dealing with.
This is really a key issue here. Another question, do you hold consultations if you're forced to close the business? If you know the business is gone, do you still consult?
Yes, because they might have an idea of how to resolve it. You know, they might be ridiculous ideas, and you don't have to take it. But it's about treating people fairly, and there is a requirement to have a redundancy process within UK legislation. So that's what you would do. Yeah. And I think it's about not drawing it out. You wouldn't have like 4 or 5 meetings in that scenario, but you would consult with people and tell them, really sorry, your role is at risk of redundancy. If we can't think of any way to avoid it, the business is going to close. Yeah. What's your viewpoint? And if they can't come up with anything, well, I'm sorry, we're going to have to confirm your redundancy. Yeah. It's the same level of interaction you would have to have with somebody if you just handed them a letter and saying, you know, it's not that much more work, but it's the best way to do it and the right way to do it and legally compliant way to do it.
A couple of questions that are sort of linked in a way. Would it be the same process if redundancies were required because of a restructure rather than performance, but a realignment of resources? So that's sort of one angle on the same question. The second one is if it's because you're changing the business model rather than needing to save costs or the business is struggling.
Reorganisation is definitely a reason for a redundancy process.
Yeah. So I guess is if you're letting people go, but the business is, I was going to say if the business is carrying on, but even if the business isn't carrying on, if you think you need to lose some people, you've got to have a consultancy.
Yeah, so if you're going through a reorganisation, again, you would have your business plan and you would think about the way the business is going to be in the future. But also I would encourage managers to have all of the data to hand. So you would have a reorganised org chart. You would have job descriptions for all of the new roles. So what you might do is put one department at risk. So, for example, a long time when I was back in corporate, it was a long time ago when I was back in corporate land, I was part of a personnel department and they wanted to change it more into a business support type role where I would be an HR business partner. So it was a different engagement, completely different role. I wasn't just dealing with the things that hit my desk. I was actually going out, liaising with managers and getting them to understand how they could really manage their resource better and to really drill down into making them more efficient as management team. Different job set completely. The whole of HR were put at risk of redundancy and we had to reapply for those roles.
Right.
But you know what? It meant that there was a bit of a reshuffle. Everybody applied for different roles. There were some casualties because they didn't need so many people. The headcount reduced, but people ended up landing in the right roles for taking the business forward. Yep. And that was part of a consultation process. So it doesn't always have to be the end of the world is nigh and the business is going under. It can be around flipping the business so that it can carry on in whatever environment it needs to. It might be that you've changed the way that you're doing things. It might be that you've got some technology that's come in that actually you don't need as many people to carry on doing that role. It might be that you've just got something that within the business that is no longer a thing. You can't do that anymore, so you have to do something different. So for example, a hospitality client who was serving tables, they may well just have a takeaway function now. You might not need so many people. If you can't use furlough for whatever reason, then you might need to look about at making redundancies. I mean, you would probably use furlough in that scenarios. That's maybe not the best example, but there will be businesses that have flipped and need to reduce their headcount.
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. Look, just a couple more questions, then we need to probably move on. What happens if an employee goes off sick just as you're about to start the consultation process?
Depends on what they're off sick with. I mean, I think being off sick doesn't preclude them from consulting with you. Yeah, you don't have to have face-to-face. They can do it over email or in writing if they want to. So it doesn't always have to be a confrontational thing. If they're really that stressed, it depends on why they're stressed. If they're stressed because they're going through the redundancy process, it's best to try and tactfully keep going with it. Because if there is a genuine redundancy situation, I'm afraid you can't stop just because somebody's not available to discuss. So it's about maybe just making adjustments to the process to make sure that they're comfortable with liaising with you, or maybe they can nominate somebody else to talk on your behalf. I've got a situation at the moment where I'm talking to a union representative rather than that individual because they've given permission to the union rep to represent them. So I talk to them, the union rep then goes back to the employee.
Right.
So I'm sitting in between the employer and the employee, but actually there's two of us consulting and discussing, and we'll resolve it between the two of us, obviously with everybody's input.
Cool. Okay, look, there's a couple more questions, but we'll come back to them in a moment. So we've talked about communication, we've talked about the consultation process, and the idea of throughout the whole process, we've got a consistent thought through message and a willingness to listen, because sometimes the good ideas, so often the good ideas come in from unexpected places.
Yeah.
We've touched a little bit on legal requirements, but what are the legal requirements, or the important ones, maybe the ones that you think companies often miss?
I think it's about keeping records, keeping accurate records of the conversations they've had, of the questions that have been asked within a consultation process, and documenting the fact that they've gone back and answered those questions. So the letter trail does seem sometimes a little over the top, but actually when you need to go back and refer to it as a process, if there's a challenge on the fact that you've made that person redundant, you'll be very grateful that you've gone through that process. So it's about telling them when they've got the right to be accompanied. It's about answering their questions so that everybody knows that they've had their questions answered. It's about giving them the opportunity to have their say. But if you do that in writing, and also confirming that no decision's been made, that there's a lot of assumption from employees that this process is all pre-designed, and that you've predetermined that I'm being made redundant because we're having this conversation about redundancy. Whereas I think it's really key for employers to say no decision has been made. We are going through a consultation process with you to understand your opinions and to seek your suggestions on how we can avoid this. And I think that's the bit that doesn't really get documented fully enough.
Yeah. And also, I guess, let's just recognize that it is stressful for the employees, but actually it's very stressful for the business owner or the business leader.
It's really stressful.
Some of the stuff that you think you would just remember, you want to wipe most of the whole process from your mind and get on with the business afterwards. But any claim that would come needs you to remember or to know the process that was gone through. Yes. So keeping notes for it is essential. And the notes I've found in the past, the notes can be as simple as a Word document that you just stack it into. Just jot down.
We keep, for our clients, we keep. So we don't keep the recordings. We do get them turned into transcripts, into Word docs, and those go on to Breathe. So we can keep an absolute record. So if you looked on the Breathe client's record for somebody that we've done a redundancy process for, you would see all the letters. You would see the notes of the meeting, if they were transcripts from a Zoom call or whether they're face-to-face meeting notes. You would see their suggestions. You would see any emails from everybody in chronological order, so that if you get to a point where there's a challenge about the decision, you can just print it all off. You've got it all there and then. You don't have to remember from memory what's going on. You've got everything there and then, because business moves on. If you're doing 3 or 4 consultation discussions with different employees, then it's difficult to that your thought going through all
Yeah.
of that, and managing the business, and thinking about where you're going to get your next sale, and dealing with the pricing structure, all of those things that a business owner has to deal with. And actually, from an HR point of view, we've done a lot of we've helped a lot of our clients with the redundancy process. We've literally been on the Zoom calls, we've written the scripts for them, we've done the letters for them, we've done everything for them. All they've done really is pitch up to the Zoom call, and we've done everything for them, because we'll keep them compliant, we'll keep them right, we'll even help them with the appeal process if that comes through too. So everything's compliant, everything's right. They don't have to think about it too much, because it is daunting. Not many people have made people redundant.
Well, you don't set up in business to make people redundant, do you? It's not even something that you consider.
No, absolutely not. So I think at a stressful time in the business, when maybe you're worried about cash flow and all of those things, the last thing you want to think about is redundancy.
Yeah.
And I think that's when business owners get it wrong, when they rush it, or they don't give it due consideration, and they don't take the time to plan for it properly. But like I say, we've helped a number of clients who actually said they didn't want our help, but then came back to us and afterwards went, oh my God, thank God you were there. So we're here to support, however small or big a business is. And I think it's about getting the proper advice and making sure that you know what you're doing before you set out, because you can really trip yourself up. And once you've caused offence to an employee, you're never going to get that trust back.
Yeah. There's we've got some more questions in on consultation, so it's clearly an important topic, and I want to sort of get back to them. But there's just one thing on there which is a particular hobby horse of mine as a business owner. We need to look after ourselves better in some of this, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, I referred to my employment law friends. I mean, I've worked with some of these employment lawyers for 20 years, and I have moments when I phone up and go, just want to sanity check something with you, because there's a lot going on at the moment, especially within HR. We've been very busy dealing with lots of things and supporting our clients all the way through this. And I have to say, there's been some Fridays when I've gone, this is really tough. I'm running my own business as well as supporting my clients, and it's important that I rely on my network to support me. And actually, there has been the odd occasion when I phoned up one of my trusted network and said, oh God, and they've gone, no, that's fine, you're okay, go and get a cup of tea, we're going to have a chat about something different, or they'll give me the answer to my query. And actually, it's about making sure that your mental health as a business owner is okay, so that you can help support your team, because otherwise you are not going to be in the right place, and actually it's going to spiral out of control. And these are difficult times. They are difficult times. They're unprecedented, and I don't like that word because it doesn't really expand and explain exactly what we're all going through at the moment. But everybody's got their different challenges. You don't know by looking at somebody on a Zoom call whether they've got challenges with their parents, with their children, with homeschooling or not homeschooling, or illness, or all of those concerns that we have in the background. There is a fuzzy line now between home and life and work life. And I think we just need to, like you say, protect our own mental health so that we can go forward.
Totally. Okay, look, question, is it a problem if you're planning to use redundancy without first using furlough? Do you have to have gone through the furlough stage before making somebody redundant?
No, you don't. But part of the consultation process may well be an employee challenging you as to why you didn't. So again, it's about having proper, robust reason for not doing so. And I think again, it goes back to my previous comments around using furlough for the right reason. If you think that you're going to be able to keep that employee going for the next 3 months, but there's going to be work maybe in March for them to come back to maybe a full-time or part-time role within your business, then you absolutely should use furlough instead of making redundancies. If you know that your business has gone to the wall and that there's no way that you're going to be able to keep that person going past March, you should do the decent thing and tell them that right now, so they can go and find an alternative position, and that you're not abusing the furlough scheme, because there will be a dim view of that.
do consultation processes have to involve the employee, or can it be done between the leadership team and maybe the HR team?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah, do you have to involve the employee in a consultation process, or could it be done between between the leadership and HR maybe? Or
No, you should talk to the employee, because as an HR person with the best will in the world, I don't know that whether that employee is going to accept a part-time position. So I think that's,
and I guess in exceptional circumstances where you said, like for instance, you're doing it with the union rep, but actually you're doing it with the union rep acting on behalf of the employee, so it does involve the employee.
Yes, absolutely, because I think that's definitely the way forward, because otherwise I think it's, if you're not going to consult with the employee, it's automatically unfair.
Yeah. Does one more sort of mix of furlough and consultation, does putting someone on furlough automatically make them at risk of redundancy?
No, not at all. I've got clients that are using it. So hospitality clients, they're using it to because they can't open for business. I've got 2 clients that are hairdressing clients, and they've had to shut because they're not able to open and not able to service anyone's requirements during the shutdown period. So they have literally furloughed their staff, and as of Monday they will be opening again, and their people will go back to full time. So it's used in its correct format of a job retention scheme. So if you didn't have furlough, you would maybe have had to talk about losing those people, so that we didn't you didn't have the commitment to them. But as you've got this sort of buffer of being able to sort of almost tuck them up in a nice little safe environment until you need them again, then that's how you use furlough. And that's
brilliant. Okay, there's a question in that sort of leads us nicely onto the next section. The question is, how do you support those who remain? And what I want to go to with this section is 2 things. How do you support those that are leaving? So you've gone through the process and you know some people are leaving, and then equally, how do you support those that are staying? So why don't we go for the leaving ones first?
Right. If someone's leaving, I guess you can help them with their CV. Some of my clients ask me to support the individual, because by that time, I mean, we don't all live in Disneyland. If you've gone through a process with somebody and you've made them redundant, they may well not want to talk to you about their onward journey. But hopefully, if you've got a relationship as an HR professional with that employee, then they might well take some advice from you about doing their CV if they want it. You can't force anybody to take that, but I think it's a nice gesture to say you could talk to our HR person about doing your CV, and maybe some advice on interview training, how to do an interview. Some people haven't been to an interview for a long time, so they might be a little rusty, they might be nervous about it. There might be some sort of you might want to develop some guides for people to have a look at, so that they can take that as a reference point. You may well have a list of agencies that you've used in the past that might be able to find them a job with their skill set in a different company.
It's a nice idea. I like that one.
So
who knows where to go if you've been working for a company for a good period of time? How do you know which is a good recruitment agency and which isn't?
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of recruitment agencies out there, and some fantastic recruitment agencies. I mean, we use them a lot. I mean, we do a lot of our own recruitment, but sometimes we get stuck with some really specialist positions, or if we need something double quick, we'll work on it, but we'll also ask an agency to help us. We've got our preferred supplier list. Most companies do. It's about making sure that that you support the employee best you can. They might not take the advice, they might not want the advice, but I think it's a nice gesture to offer it. And sometimes you have to do that through a third party, because like I say, the relationship may well break down. You can't always leave as friends. There may be some animosity, hopefully not, but being realistic about it, there often is.
It's going to be there. So let's flip it to the people who are remaining. I'm trying to remember who it was. There was a book that I read where roughly half the staff, an entire office, was being made redundant, and the CEO was saying to a coach or a mentor or somebody that he was going to fly out to this other office and be there to tell the people that were leaving because he felt he owed it to them personally. But actually his mentor said, no, your best place is with the people that are staying. Yeah. Send another key member of the team, but, you know, to be with the people that are leaving. But your job is the ones that are staying. They're the future.
100%. And I think the people that are staying have got all sorts of emotions going on.
Was it survivor syndrome?
Yeah. I mean, that sounds melodramatic, but I think that there is a massive element of that. You walking back into an office, I mean, at the moment, we're not in the office environment per se, but if you walk into the office and there's half the desks are empty, I mean, that's one thing, but actually the work still needs to be done. So you might not be walking straight back into your usual role. There may be other bits and pieces you have to pick up. There may be bits that you're not proficient with, that you might need training in, that you might need support with. You might not have agreed with the process, you know, and I think at the end of the day, the business owner has to be transparent with those people and explain why these things have happened, because those people will not have been within the consultation process. So it's about, again, good communication, making sure that you keep your team informed of what's going on and what is happening for the future. Because if you've decided as a business owner that you're going to do something different with your business, you need to be telling your team that. So that they're fully on board, because again, they might have some good suggestions on how to improve that and make the processes more smoothly run. But it is about protecting the people that are left, because they're going to be the future of your business going forwards. And again, it's about not over-promising and under-delivering. So if you tell your team, you know, right, we've let go of 10 people out of the 40 that we've got. I'm not saying this is the end of it. I'm not saying we are going to make redundancies, but we need to be aware that this is an ever-changing landscape, and that my promise to you is that I'll keep you informed.
Yeah, we're all in this together is kind of a good message, isn't it? You know?
Yes. And I think you'll get more commitment from your existing staff or your remaining staff on that basis.
Look, I think there's still a few more. Let's see if we can tick off a few of the questions relatively quickly, because I'm conscious of time. There's one here that I think we've touched on before, but do employees have different rights if they've been with a company for under 2 years? So the answer is yes, but actually treat them the same?
Yeah, I think treat them the same, but they don't have an entitlement to a redundancy payment if they've been under 2 years.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, good. What else have we got? Any tips when unfortunately a person being made redundant due to a restructure has a disability? How can you avoid or reduce the risk of a claim of unfair dismissal?
Well, you're not making them redundant because they've got a disability. You're making them redundant because the role no longer exists. And I think as long as you don't reference the fact that they've got the disability, you're not making them redundant because they're disabled. You're making them the role redundant, and it's not about the person. And it goes back to our earlier comment about it's about the role. You have to focus on the role for the business, the existing role and the roles that you want to go forward. It's not about individuals, and it's not personal to individuals. So if you're focusing on the fact that it's a role rather than an individual, then you won't come across that issue.
And is it there's a point where you go through the planning process, you decide that you have to have redundancies. It then sort of comes down to the person, doesn't it? Because at some point you have to choose who goes and who stays.
Yeah.
So is it all about how you have that selection criteria?
Yes, and
we've documented.
Yes, absolutely. And employees have the right to have a look at their matrix, so they can see how you've scored them. They don't have the right to see everybody's, so they haven't got that comparable side of things, but they have got the right to see their own matrix. And it's around making sure that matrix is fit for purpose and ensuring that you've given it due consideration. And when you're scoring somebody, I would always advise my clients to have 2 people do it, so that you have a different point of view. So it's not just one person's point of view, and then average the scores out.
I just want to dwell on that a moment, because I think that's a massive piece of advice, a scoring matrix. Just talk us through what a scoring matrix looks like.
So we have a spreadsheet that we develop for our clients, so that they can score on a level of 1 to 4 for each skill that they want to retain within the business, or that they think they need within the business, or that the person has currently. So for example, if it was important for an HR professional to be qualified and to have 20 years experience because the role the future role dictates that needs to happen, and you've got somebody without a qualification who's only got 5 years experience, you would score the person with the more experience higher because you required that skill set within the business. So we've developed spreadsheets with all of that information on that we can send to clients, and they fill that out. And we get them to do it, two senior people within the business. So it might be the person's line manager and the business owner in that scenario. If you can't have 2 people, well, so be it. But we tend to advise that, and then we average the scores out so that you have one score, but it's incorporated both people's opinions.
And do you you have to be a bit careful there, I guess, that you don't sort of skew the questions so they're leading you to a decision that's against a protected.
Yes. And that's why it's important to get proper advice on these things. We will always challenge our clients. Why have you done that? That if you go down that route, you're going to end up with that situation, and get them to think about it. And it's like all of these things, from the start of the process to the end. Sometimes you need someone to positively challenge you so that you are robust in your answer and your thought process, because just steaming in and doing these things will always result in a problem.
And I think that's an important one. Again, that's another one that I would just want to sort of dwell on there for a moment. You're an HR consultant, you run an HR consultancy, you've been doing this kind of thing for years, and it could so easily be, I could sit here and say, oh yeah, well, you would say we need to have an expert in on this one, but there are so many areas in our lives where we get experts in. We get people in to do things for us personally, things for us as our business that we're not good at ourselves. And this is it seems so tempting to fumble through the redundancy process with the help of Mr. Google. And it's just, I think this is just one where it's so wise to call in the experts. And we know so many HR consultancies that are doing a stunning job helping their clients.
I think the test for me is if a client phones up and says, you don't know you need HR until you need HR. It's like you don't know that you need a car mechanic until your car's broken. You don't take a paracetamol until you've got a headache.
Yeah.
But when you've got that headache, or you want it to go right away because it's unpleasant and it's uncomfortable, it might be keeping you awake at night. And I think if you've got an HR issue that's keeping you awake at night, or you're giving it too much thought, that's when you need to jump in and find somebody else to help you out, because actually you don't know what you don't know, in the same way that I don't know what I don't know about accounts. I have a fantastic accountancy firm that I use for my accounts, because I could sit and Google all day long. I think I'd know all the answers, but I don't know all the nuances. And it's
so there's an interesting follow-up to that where you don't know you've got a headache until you've got the headache, but if you keep getting headaches, at some point you've got to try and work out why they're arriving.
Yes.
So this is for me where a business owner should really look to get some external input, be that some external HR advice early, so to try and avoid these things happening.
And it doesn't need to be expensive. A lot of my clients tend to start with us, and we all have clients that decide they're going to do the right thing from day one, and we've got lots of small clients that taking on their first employee, that's when we get involved, and they start as they mean to go on.
Yeah.
But I have equally the number of clients that are in a pain point and call us to get them out of a troublesome situation that actually could have been completely avoided if they just thought about what they were doing and called us earlier. And I have a phrase that I say to all my clients: you have to tell me where all the bodies are buried so that I can get you out of this nonsense. But actually, next time, could you call me before? Because your bill will be a lot smaller.
As you're digging, think, I need to call. Yeah, look, brilliant. Look, I think we're really close on time. So I just want to try and get a couple more questions in, and then we'll do a little bit of a wrap up. What rights does an employee have if you outsource their role? Presumably then if you've got to make them redundant because you're outsourcing it to somebody else. Yeah,
you need to look at the TUPE rules though as well, so it's not as simplistic as that. So you'd need to look and see. So I think that's a specific issue. If you're outsourcing their role and their role is no longer within the business, technically that's a redundancy situation, but you'd need to look at it in the wider context.
As to whether the employee should be or is going to the other organisation.
Yes.
Yeah, cool, okay. multiple people in the same role, someone with a disability is naturally not as efficient as someone in the same role who's not.
You would take that into account in your scoring, and you wouldn't mark them down necessarily for that reason.
So if somebody with a disability was naturally not as efficient, but equally you had somebody who just plain wasn't in it as efficient, that would show in the scoring, wouldn't it? You'd score everybody on the same basis.
Yes, yes. but you would maybe take into account the fact that that person had a disability. So maybe you wouldn't use that you wouldn't maybe use that element within your scoring matrix so that it wasn't skewed towards the person with the disability. You would maybe use another matrix reason for making your decision.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see if we can tick off the last two questions. This one might be a bit specific, but somebody was on furlough, received a call saying she'd been made redundant. No warning of redundancies, not even that they were possible. But later they were told that there'd been a discussion in the company for a while. She didn't know about that because she was on furlough. I can see your face on this one. Been employed for under a year and is pregnant. There's a whole bunch of is there, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. Without seeing the specifics, I think it's difficult to state, but I think that that's something that needs some proper thought.
But fundamentally, can we say that furlough and redundancy are different things?
Totally.
One is not a route into the other, so separate the two.
Totally, and actually, interestingly, if you look at the gov.uk website, it will say that you need to get permission from your employees and need to talk to them about going on to furlough and document it accordingly. So again, it's a consultation process.
Yeah, okay, great. Maybe the last question we can get, if you outsource a service and the individual affected does not want to work for the new provider, presumably, says the questioner, you'd go into consult and then make redundant.
No, not necessarily. If it's a GP situation and they don't want to transfer, that's seen as a resignation.
Interesting.
So it's a different process.
Yeah, good. Okay, so great. Seek more advice on that one, I think.
Yeah, I think it's about not making assumptions. Don't make assumptions.
Yeah.
Make sure you do your planning. Don't make assumptions about things that are maybe niggles. If they're a niggle, then get proper advice on it.
Yeah. Okay, look, brilliant. We've hit just over time, so thanks for everybody's patience, but I think we've covered some really interesting things. For me, the big thing is that the questioning around consultation is clearly something that that is key to this, and I know we've got at least one person from the Breathe content team listening in. So Nick, message received. We need some content on consultation. Let's wrap things up. Summary. What's your key one or two things that you would say to any company that maybe you see them doing wrong?
I think you need to plan. You need to plan from the minute you start thinking there's a problem all the way through. You need to document everything properly and keep proper records. The Breathe system is a fantastic system for doing that. And what we tend to do is to get the letters signed electronically, and then we put them on the Breathe account for our clients. So actually it is seamless. But get some support from somebody who knows what they're talking about. It doesn't have to be massively expensive. We deal with small companies that just have one employee all the way through to people who have 70. And I know there's a lot of HR consultants out there that have that same approach. We charge by the hour, even if it's just a sanity check to get a process sorted out so that you can manage that yourselves. You don't have to have somebody manage the whole thing. I would just make sure that you get proper advice, because you can really tie yourself up in knots. And at this time when you should be focusing on bringing your business out the other side of this scenario, it's best just to take that paracetamol and get rid of that headache.
Yeah. And I would add maybe one extra thing that it's got to be about empathy. One of our values is all about walking a mile in the other person's shoes. You don't have to, you don't have to give in to them. You don't have to pander to their views, but you have to understand their views. If you're sitting across the table from them, I think it makes it so much better for everybody.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's around making sure that you're doing the honourable thing. It might not be something that you want to do, but if you have to do it, it's doing it the right way and being, like you say, with empathy and support.
Awesome. Look, that's great. I know there'll be a bunch more questions out there. We'll send out a recording of this, and we'll try and cover some of the key issues in upcoming content on the Breathe website. Have a look at our blog, have a look at our documents. There's a lot there to help businesses, and particularly sort of the small and medium businesses. Becca, how should people contact you?
I'm on LinkedIn, Rebecca Warmington, or hrcentral.co.uk. My telephone number is 07968 787 182. If anybody wants to contact me by phone, then please do so. We're really happy to help any way we can.
Brilliant. Okay, so we'll put out those contact details in case you missed them. We'll put them out in the follow-up email. But brilliant. Thank you as ever. Tackled some really difficult situations there and questions, so I appreciate you coming along to that, Becca. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for inviting me. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks to everybody who's joined us. Look forward to hearing your feedback on this, and from there we'll end things. So thanks again, and look forward to the next one.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Cheers.